Welcome to Trine Days Roundtable 19. Let's make King Charles the Henry George of the 21st century. I am Bruce Tatoris. I moderate these roundtables, and these were inspired by the Valediction by Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould. Their two-book memoir is about their Fitzgerald family history and what that legacy means for building peace today. Paul and Liz have written a proposal for world peace with economic justice as the foundation. Alanna Hartzok, an Earth Rights visionary and United Nations NGO Representative for the International Union for Land Value Taxation, has written an open letter to King Charles on his coronation, which we'll discuss today. The coronation is this coming Saturday, May 6th. Alanna's letter spearheads our campaign to promote the proposal for world peace, and both can and should be read online at valediction.net/world-peace. Paul and Liz will set the scene for today. At some point, I hope to read a little bit about Henry George. But first, our host, Trine Days publisher, and a writer, researcher, musician, and son of an intelligence officer who has been exploring conspiracy theory land for over 50 years, Chris Milligan.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you all for, spending your time here. It is time for us to graduate from the old power structures. It's the 21st century, and I think we should push it way, way beyond. The people that built the Constitution, they had to mollify slave owners, okay? People who believe that they have the right to own other human beings. Everything that's old is not bad. I mean, the old tribal wisdom, the jubilees that used to happen. I mean, when you had a small tribe, you looked to take care of everybody, okay? We've gone, to where everybody doesn't know everybody. So it's we have to have institutions to help us, take care of everything. Now, I think a lot of this is going to get down to money. What is it? Okay. And what does it do? Okay. And I really think we need to go into something such as like UBI, Universal Basic Income. Just think of the world we could have if you had people that had access to build a better world instead of just looking down and trying to scrabble for their own existence when all of us are here together. But I'm very, very hopeful with the internet and the ability to discuss things with multiple people. I mean, isn't this wonderful where we can sit and we can get around a virtual table and talk about things and look and try and get solutions to the problems that we have here on this planet. Not just, look at Henry George and the land tax, but we're going to have to do things like the 14th Amendment. They have used the 14th Amendment to give corporations the right of natural persons, okay? Because in the 14th Amendment, they just left out that word, natural persons. There's a lot of change that needs to happen, and I think it can happen, and it only happens if we try. So onwards to a better future for our children. Amen.
Thank you, Chris.
Amen.
Paul Fitzgerald and Elizabeth Gould.
Well, we are going to give you a little bit of an update, and also a little bit for those of you who really don't know Paul's and my work. This will give you a little bit of an idea of what route we actually took to end up right here today with Alanna and this project, and all of you here to hear it. This is actually a mystical update that is about our daughter, Alyssa, and it is connected to King Charles. Before revealing it, I want to give you this quick rundown of Alyssa's mystical role in our Afghan story. And for those who don't know, Paul and I got the first visas to go to Afghanistan in 1981 after the Soviet invasion and the Western media were kicked out. So that was our initiation as journalists. But by 1987, we actually quit focusing on Afghanistan as journalists because we were so frustrated with getting nowhere at changing the official narrative about the true causes of the 1979 Soviet invasion. So we raised a question to ourselves. If facts don't matter, what does and what is journalism? And that's when we looked at our experience from a different perspective and started writing scripts. By the end of the 1980s, we had completed 4, but had not found the right story to express our vision. And then in September of 1991, Alyssa woke up one morning for school to tell me about a dream she had had with Paul's deceased father. He was accompanied by a man wearing a Scottish plaid suit with bell-bottom trousers and a matching hat. The man told Alyssa he was 800 years old. Paul already knew the Fitzgerald family had come to Ireland as mercenaries 800 years ago for Henry II, and decided the dream was a message to dig into the Fitzgerald history for answers. 3 months later, we saw Oliver Stone's film JFK and found the inspiration we were looking for. Stone's inclusion of a secret society with deeper motives for the assassination resonated with us. In our research into the 1169 Norman invasion of Ireland, an enterprise largely run by the Fitzgerald family, we discovered reasons why some secret societies might be motivated to eliminate JFK as retribution for crimes from the deep past. We then developed the Voice research paper with the hope that Oliver Stone would be interested in it too. But when we met with him, he wanted Afghanistan instead. Once we began to work on the script, the mythic implications emerged when many documents preceding the Afghan crisis were declassified. But as we continued to do the research, it was discovering a mystical answer in a book written about 19th century British efforts in Afghanistan that shocked us to the core. It had photos of British and Afghan soldiers, but it serendipitously included a photo of an American wearing a Scottish plaid suit and bell-bottom trousers and a matching turban. The photo was of Alexander Gardner, a mercenary who'd found his way to Afghanistan in the 1820s. He discovered the religion of Zoroaster, settled in the mountains, and married an Afghan princess. Alyssa confirmed that day when she came home from school that the soldier in the photo was the man from her dreams. As we continued to develop the Voice as a novel, Oliver became intrigued and asked us to connect its esoteric background with a fact-based Afghanistan script. We began merging the past, present, and future into a different kind of story. In writing the script, the antagonist, modeled after CBS foreign news editor Peter Larkin, who hired us in 1981 for CBS News, emerged as an angry veteran who twisted the Afghanistan story to get back at the Soviets for what he believed they did to him in Vietnam. But in the novel, the character had matured as a victim of his own propaganda. And through the narrative, the character of Alyssa, as Paul's daughter, resolved the conflict between Peter, the Peter character, and Paul. Even though Alyssa had no involvement in our work, over the decades, many of our Afghan contacts whom she had never met continued to cross into her life. The most powerful occurred when she met Peter Larkin, the CBS foreign editor, through her friendship with his daughter. We knew nothing about Brett until December 23rd, 2011, when they both arrived at our home for a party as guests of Alyssa. Having the man who launched us into our Afghan saga arrive at our home was surreal. It was as if the novelized encounter between Paul and Peter through Alyssa, foreshadowed in the Voice, had written itself. It was a revelatory moment produced by our daughters that complicated a journey begun 30 years before between two competing storytellers. Alyssa's synchronicities continued to come to her through our Afghan story. But for the first time since her 1992 dream, Alyssa had a synchronicity of a very different nature, because it was not only connected to our work, which is not directly connected right now to Afghanistan through King Charles. but it also was connected to her work. Alyssa is a food writer who told us on April 19, 2023, she was off to London that evening to interview Tom Parker Bowles the next day. Bowles is a well-known British food writer. As it happens, the April 20th interview was also the anniversary date of the death of Paul's father and the date chosen twice by Oliver for our meetings. If you haven't figured it out already, Thomas Parker Bowles is the son of Queen Camilla and Andrew Parker Bowles. Tom's stepfather and godfather is King Charles III, placing Alyssa 2 degrees from the target of our letter during the interregnum preceding the coronation. Since her return, we've been updated to a few more coincidences. In her chat with Tom, she discovered that Camilla's sun sign is Cancer and Andrew's is Capricorn. That happens to match Paul and me. And in addition, a tiny little addition, but still important, Tom and Alyssa credit their mother's home cooking as the inspiration for them to become food writers. If anyone has any ideas how we can further understand the meanings of this, we'll be delighted to get into that in our questions section.
And now, Birthrights visionary, Alanna Hartzok.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, everyone who's joined today. That's great. Wonderful. Liz, I thought that was a very thorough way of updating several decades of your life for us. Thank you. I wanted to start with a simple visualization exercise, if you will. Some people say, oh, you're the land value tax people. Well, there's a reason why we're excited and avidly interested in tax policy reform. And I believe it comes from a consciousness shift that happens for those of us who get so engaged with this. So I wanted to do a simple visualization. I'd like you to look around your room right now and reflect on the various objects in the room and think about where those objects come from. Think about what they're made out of. Just take a moment, look around your room, look item at item and say, oh, is that metal? Is that fabric? Is that leather? Is that ceramic? And as you contemplate on the material composition of the items, your chair that you're sitting on, the clothing that you're wearing, let your mind travel down to the source of these items and recognize that the source is the mud, the dirt of the earth, the mud, the water, everything that is somehow here, not made by human hands, but that all these magnificent creations are the result of these hands and these minds working up the mud to these amazing forms. Depends on the mind of that human, what we make with the hands. So I want to read now just 2 paragraphs from the King Charles letter. And I'm very personal, if you've read the letter, in addressing him as my astrological twin brother, which is what he is, strangely enough. And background to that is when Liz found out that I was born in the exact same day and within like a few minutes. It was her idea to write the letter. So Liz's inspiration became the King Charles letter and the Earth Rights Manifesto. So I say to him, during my time since we were born, I've come to the realization that the ultimate claim of ownership of the Earth's land and natural resources cannot be made on the basis of prior claim, discovery, purchase, which is our buying and selling land system. It cannot be made on the basis of military conquest, ability to maintain and secure possession, even constitutional law, or length of residency. Ultimately, the only rational, the portable, moral, just, and ethical basis upon which a claim of ownership can be made is by birthright to the gifts of nature and that cannot be an exclusive claim. The claim by birthright can only be legitimate if it is acknowledged that all other human beings have an equal claim to land and natural resources. The deepest ethical dimension of territorial rights recognizes that humanity is one and indivisible in its fundamental claim to the earth as a birthright of all. Now, this we may call unity consciousness, a consciousness that understands that ultimately there's no separation. There is unique expression, but we are all connected. There is a oneness, and that is indigenous people's worldview. The Maori in New Zealand have the word Turunga Wewe. Turunga Wewe means a place to stand. That's the perception, the birthright on the earth. We all have a place to stand. Curiously enough, the very first Green Party was the New Zealand Values Party. And in their platform, they were strongly for the land value tax policy and based on Turunga Wewe, indigenous knowing. Now, as we proceed through the future of our time in meetings together, there are 4 main points in the Charles letter, and the letter will be issued at some point as simply Earth Rights Manifesto. We'll drop the reference to Charles for future realization of the 4 key policies, which I'd like to see us discuss going forward. So those 4 policies being direct access to land via community land trusts, new eco-villages. Then 2, the land value tax policy. 3, resource rent, capture, resource rent, sovereign wealth funds, like the Alaska Permanent Fund for natural resources. And we're bearing in mind that the wars are fought over land and natural resources nearly always. Down at the bottom of the conflict is a land and resource war. And that's also why we're connecting economic justice of the land issue and the solution to the land problem, the economics of peace, with poverty, wealth inequality, and homelessness. These big social problems, actually, as we drill down, we connect the dots to the land problem. So in solving the land problem, as Leo Tolstoy once said, we are solving other social problems. And he said all other social problems. So the last point in the Charles letter is about John Christensen and the Tax Justice Network, who's really brought to light this horrible, horrible corruption of the offshore tax shelters. These little islands where corporations are claiming that they have a post office box and claim that as their office as a way to keep all of their trillions of dollars worth of wealth hidden from taxation, and their activities often hidden, very nefarious activities such as human trafficking, drug trafficking, and so many others. So really need to bring light on this problem of this tax evasion by big financial entities. And we also have the good news that when you bring the tax base to the land and resources, it can't be carted away. You can't stash it in an offshore island. So a very direct way to get at this hidden wealth is to simply tax the land and resource rent, the unearned income that accrues to our gifts of nature, the land and resource rent. So thank you for listening. That is pretty much the piece that I bring for today. And Bruce, I'll turn it over to you as moderator.
Thank you. I had the impulse to read from Paul and Liz's peace proposal, just some foundational stuff about Henry George. This is chapter 10 of Paul and Liz's peace proposal. It's a piece from the Council of Georgist Organizations. For all I know, the author's on this roundtable. And the chapter 10 is called The Marriage of Economic Justice and World Peace Will Create Heaven on Earth. to liberate production from taxation, the earth from monopoly, and humanity from poverty. The term Georgist philosophy refers to the economic analysis and social philosophy advanced by the North American economist Henry George. The Georgist philosophy advocates equal rights for all and special privileges for none. It affirms a universal right for all to share in the gifts and opportunities provided by nature. Central to this philosophy is the conviction that social problems must be traced to their root causes and remedied at that level, rather than by dealing with mere symptoms. The science of political economy, whose task is to explore such root causes, can and must be understood not just by experts, but by everyday people, so that injustice and corruption cannot be foisted on an unwitting public. Economic analysis shows that land values, which are due to natural and social processes, should be the source of public revenue, and that taxes on labor, thrift, and industry should be eliminated. Properly understood, economics is not a dismal science, but a guide for achieving justice and sustainable prosperity. Born in Philadelphia in 1839, Henry George went on to San Francisco and became a newspaper editor who addressed the social problems of his day. On a visit to New York, he was shocked by the contrast between wealth and poverty. He resolved to find a solution, if he could, and the result was his book, Progress and Poverty, in 1879, which is said to be the all-time best-selling book on economics. George's fame led him to be drafted by the United Labor Party to run for mayor of New York in 1886. He lost to Abraham Hewitt, and Teddy Roosevelt came in third. George traveled and lectured extensively around the world and wrote several more influential books, including Social Problems, Protection or Free Trade, which was read in its entirety into the U.S. congressional record. Next to Mark Twain, Henry George was the most popular public speaker in the United States of America.
You know, we've got Fred Harrison here, and he's written, several books about this. And I'd like him to talk a little bit about his Re-Our-Rent books, and then also the Power in Land.
Thanks for the introduction, but those of you who are not familiar with the Georgist cause need to appreciate that the Georgist movement worldwide has worked for more than a century trying to promote this philosophy, and we got nowhere. Now, there has to be a reason for that, and it's not explicable in terms of a fault with the philosophy, because there are any number of Nobel Prize winning economists who would actually say, yes, it's correct. Okay, so therefore there's the explanation for our failure, because there were a few hesitant victories at the beginning of the 20th century, but our failure to make an impact over a century has to be explained if we're going to progress the cause. Now, Alanna's chosen to address the king, who will be ordained on Saturday. I don't know how much mileage we're going to get out of that, but I can tell you that in the last couple of days, I've been quite shocked to hear an eminent historian and a very popular newspaper columnist say that the monarchy in this country probably won't survive more than the next 2 decades.
Mhm.
And if King Charles really did start to voice Henry George, he wouldn't last on the throne more than 1 or 2 years. That's the reality, I think. So if any efforts, if any energy is to be expended in progressing the cause of changing the fiscal system and the way life operates, I'm afraid we have to find a novel way, a new narrative in which to do it. And so I was hoping to be just an onlooker this evening to hear if there was such a viable alternative narrative coming from the States, which I'm hoping there will be, because I'm more than happy just to hear how you guys are going to go about it.
It can happen. It just takes work. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be a publisher. They have tried to stop me plenty of times. Okay. And when, my father was in intelligence and he told me about these secret societies. I didn't believe him and didn't understand him, but have done years and years of research. Okay. And basically you had right around in the late 1800s and the 1900s, these guys really become able to reach down from their position and affect our physical world and affect what was going on. They really clamped down on their power in the early 1900s, and then really started to solidify it after World War II. And then they did an act where they killed our president. Okay, and part of that was a psychological hit on the people to make them think that they had no control, that these people were in control. But okay, with continued education, continued research, I was so amazed. I was in a library and I came across this book that told about a fascist plot against FDR in the late 1930s. Okay, it wasn't taught to me in school. Okay, I had to find out about it myself in the library. I hadn't heard about Henry George at all. Okay, a person had to bring me a book about it called Counting Bounty. And I says, how come I haven't heard about this person before? Okay, and so one thing we're doing is we're letting people know about this. We have to challenge the power that these people have done. And we have the tools here in the United States with the ability to vote, okay, to actually get people in power that will do Henry George's program, like Alanna, they were able to do in Pennsylvania. And there's other places where it has happened on a local thing, but most people have no idea. They've never heard of it. Okay, so again, it's continuing education, and then, like I said before, we've got to graduate from these old power structures. The stock market is gambling. Okay, I mean, New York State had to change their gambling laws to make the stock market a viable option. Okay, so you've got people in the stock market, they're going to make money if democracy fails. So you think they're going to bet on that and try and make that happen? Yes, they are. So again, it's about continued discussion and moving forward instead of having these people that want to take us back into autocratic things, have a king rule over us, and all these different things. So I truly think that it wasn't a failure. They shunted off to the side. And we're bringing it to the fore. So onwards.
I'd like very much to establish, being the one who basically came up with the idea to have Alanna send a letter, to King Charles. I'd like to give a little background on conceptually what I was trying to do and why I think we are actually, Fred, addressing exactly what you're saying. We're not concerned about how long King Charles stays on the throne, whether it's 2 years or 20 years or 2 more 100 years. We think, though, he's the poster boy for the problem. This is a family through him that owns more land than anyone else on the planet. That is an attention getter. That is a way to break through that is a way to, you see, when you personalize it that way, it has more reality for people. And that's what we're trying to play on. But we would like, I think, obviously we look at the Georges themselves, and all of you who are highly educated and clearly very frustrated at what's gone on over the last, more than 100 years, I guess at this point, well over that. So we know that originally it was clear that the Georgist ideas were so powerful, they could have shut down the entire war industry. The entire concept of war could have been shut down. And I think that is a tribute to how powerful the ideas are. In fact, the suppression is a reflection of that. And the fact that they actually created neoliberalism to basically shut down the Georgist possibility, I think, is another tribute to how powerful the ideas are. But its time has come. And King Charles is, he is in a pivotal position, okay, because of the fact that it is the ideas that he represents are losing currency. Okay, so again, our concern is not about whether he personally acknowledges it or not. We're using him as an attention getter, as a symbol for what is wrong with the current world. And so I think that if you can take it with that attitude, and as we said, we're going to create a letter that does not have any reference to King Charles. So we have other ways, but we feel the idea of really beginning to talk it into the system and become very enthusiastic about what it can do. And really, all you people that have been struggling to get the message out, to really begin to say, this is a real opportunity and we can break through in a possible way that we never could before.
I want to quickly read Wendell's comment and then get to these friendly yellow hands I see raised. Wendell Fitzgerald wrote, no failure. Even Henry George said it might take a bit of time. Ladies first with the yellow hands. Ruth, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for this. What I have to say is just a perspective. I was looking at how difficult it is for the force of love to actually organize itself and create a juggernaut of an action. How do you organize love? And these, at the same time, fear is so easy to create an army. It's so easy to get people to march in line. It's so easy to divide and conquer. And this has been used over and over by the people that understand exactly how to manipulate people. And it has worked, and it has worked, and it has worked. And the thing that I think is happening now that is very different is the evidence of that manipulation to enslave the whole human race is becoming evident to many people. But I do think it's important to think about how it is that you create with the force of coherence and love and keep things free and be able to have that be a real force in the world.
So, Edward.
Yes. I spent my whole professional life working in the belly of the beast, in the corporate sector, and particularly the financial corporate sector. One of the things I learned early on is once you establish some credibility with your peers on the issues that they feel are most important, you can begin to introduce to them some of the issues that you feel are important. So in 1984, the end of 1984, I was merged out of the job I had managing the residential mortgage program for a commercial bank, and I went to Fannie Mae. And at Fannie Mae, I thought, I'm now entering a place where I might be able to have some influence.
Ed, say what Fannie Mae means. People are from different countries here.
Okay, Fannie Mae, its formal name was the Federal National Mortgage Association, and was founded established by the federal government to help make mortgage financing available to most people in the United States who are seeking home ownership. And it's a very complex way to do that. Basically, what you do is the banks and mortgage bankers make whole loans and then sell them to Fannie Mae and Fannie Mae's counterparts. It takes that risk off their books and passes it on to these larger entities. So it's much more complex. We could do a whole show on it. But anyway, so I went to Fannie Mae with this idea that I would do what I was required to do in my job, build up credibility, and maybe eventually they would begin to listen to me about the things I had to say about what was wrong with the economy and why so many people could not afford to purchase housing in our society. And so from 1985 until 1995, I pretty much kept quiet. But Fannie Mae was interesting in that it supported me. I was elected to the board of the Henry George School of Social Science in New York, and I was allowed by my company to take a day off every month to go to board meetings. Not that they knew what the Henry George School stood for, but they thought it was I was being a good corporate citizen, and they could, say that. And then about that same year, Fred Harrison invited me to go with him and others to Russia to talk to the Russian Duma about land value taxation. And my job at that meeting in Moscow was to explain to the Russians how they could privatize their banking system without making all the mistakes that we had made in America and the West. And so when I came back from that trip, I was now the one person with international experience in my company, in my office. And so when Russian bankers came to Philadelphia to want to talk about Fannie Mae and our system, they called on me to talk to the Russian bankers. I don't know how that other people can translate that kind of credibility in what you do with your own constituency, but I was fortunately able to do that. And a few years before I retired, I actually convinced my senior people at Fannie Mae to send me out on the road to talk to stakeholder groups about the need for land value taxation as a key to affordable housing and to rebuilding distressed communities. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And I spoke to dozens of stakeholder groups in major cities in the Northeastern United States. One point I want to point to you, which is consistent with Fred's observation. One of the cities I went to was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania had been one of the cities that had adopted the two-rate property tax and had it in place for many decades and then abandoned it. So I went to Pittsburgh, and I was accompanied by Joshua Vincent, who was helping me with technical advice. And he's the guy in the United States who really does all the studies for cities on land value taxation. So we managed, our local office in Pittsburgh brought together this huge group of stakeholders in Pittsburgh, bankers, some politicians, nonprofit people, and we gave them a presentation on the virtues of moving to land value taxation. Not one of the people that was in that room had any knowledge that Pittsburgh had ever had land value taxation or two-rate property tax. And so it was clearly evident that those of us who had been advocating and even getting legislation had failed to generate sufficient public support so that when challenge came to the legislation, the politicians had an easy time of overturning it. So that's my personal lesson for whatever it's worth.
That is why we are so intent on getting this basic information that we're calling the manifesto into as many people's hands, just as a way to get people to that first step, because we think there's enough in it for people to get a sense of it. And that's exactly the point. We're totally 100%.
I have only one other thing to add. People have to be hit over the head again and again and again.
Yeah.
I've taught the Henry George basic course on political economy to thousands of people. And I've taught to some of them in the last 10 years or so over and over again. and they still don't get it.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Somehow this team, Trine Day, Liz, Paul, Chris, have gotten it. So we're interested in how they didn't take a class. They didn't read Progress in Poverty. Something clicked. We're exploring it. I interviewed Paul and Liz a week ago, trying to understand what did you bring to the table that you got it so deeply. What we're looking for is that magic key where it all clicks without having to read books and take years and years to try to get to it. We're
Exactly.
searching together, right, Liz? Paul?
Exactly. Yeah. And my attitude is, no courses in economics. It was very obvious how powerful it was. It didn't take that long at all.
As I emphasized to you, Alanna, practicality. We're both very practical people,
Yeah.
and we just wanted to work. And the fact is it was very easy to understand that
It
George's
works.
philosophy worked. That's all. And so it's a start. It's a place to start. And the thing is to uncomplicate it for people, to make it straightforward. And I think more so now than ever in our history, in our lives, we can see that we needed a real change, and in a fundamental change that will not frighten people. As you said, we got to get away from the fear idea and get away to the fact that we actually can solve the problem for all of us.
I hope that we are the 97th and the 98th and the 99th monkey. And when the next person hears about it, given the thousands that
Right.
Edward taught and the billions who've read Fred Harrison's books, that it could pop like popcorn.
It's the 1 penny a day. If you take 1 penny a day, I'm sure most of you know what happens after 30 days.
That's a good
That
metaphor. But
is what we're
when
dealing
I was in grammar school, I had a nun who approached that when I think I was in the 3rd grade. Sister Mary Gonzaga said that to me. She said, "Would you take a job if I offered you 1 penny a day and doubled it every day for 30 days? Would you take that job, Paul?" And everyone looked at each other and said, "What is she talking about?" And she said, "Well, you just lost. Yes, if you said no, then you just lost over $1 million." It's like, what?
5 million.
Chris just put in the chat that you end up with $5,368,709.12
I know.
And thank you, Sister Mary Gonzaga.
compared to the upfront.
Okay.
Miriam wrote the letter you're sending to King Charles is basically a letter that you were sending to the media with "Dear King Charles" as the title. You aren't actually interested in getting King Charles on the Henry George team. As Liz well explained earlier, it's a great hook since he's being coronated on Saturday, and we're going to have a follow-up roundtable 1 week from today.
Actually, I personally believe that there is a chance that Henry George ideas could be implemented on a, let's say, on a private level and not just on a government level. So if there was such a thing as a benevolent king, let's say, who would open up his estate to the pilot Henry George scheme, where he would still be considered as the steward of this land rather than, let's say, the owner, but he would be a benevolent steward, then perhaps it could be an incentive for him if he was considered to continue a benevolent monarchy. Then it might be an incentive, because that way the monarchy might continue for him.
Well, let's ask his astrological twin sister Alanna or Liz first. What?
Well, I want to make one clear point. Alanna did send the letter and her book to King Charles. So we're very serious that we would love to actually get it into to the target of this letter. But what we were trying to say is that we knew that, there was no way we could control that. So I think that would be my point to you. This was done very seriously. We think the man that owns 1/6 of the world's surface is a perfect target for what this letter is presenting. That's really the way we viewed it.
And this team here, Trine Day, have sent out more than 400 press releases. So this planting of the seeds as far as possible, and others of us have sent it and made efforts to contact the press at this time. So we never know when those kernels are going to pop. We'll keep seeding the zeitgeist as as efficiently and as sophisticatedly and as with much love and intention as we can muster.
And Miriam, you ain't seen nothing yet. If you haven't read the peace proposal and read the letter, they're at your fingertips at valediction.net/world-peace. I want to say Ms. Gonzalez again, too, at the risk of butchering your first name. How are you?
Kisia, thank you. What I'm taking of this meeting is a lot of hope and faith. Hope because as Georgians, we have to expect to get to some point and with the end of what we ambition to see in the world, which is peace and equality. And I have to say in the first place that my ancestor came from St. Vincent 224 years to the area of Central America. And the biggest oppressor over there was the British Army and Kingdom, and against them is the fight that my ancestor put on and decided to go to exile rather than submit themselves into slavery or changing who they were. Saying that, I'm originally from Honduras, and I studied for 7 years in Brazil, in the northeast of Brazil, which is a region where it is very poor, and the majority of indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples are there in place in the northeast of Brazil. So I become very face-to-face with poverty, and being a medical doctor struck me how to help people to access health. And when I returned to my country, I find out that there was no place for me in the medical field because there were 403 medical unemployed. Today, as per today, there are 10,000 medical doctors without a job in Honduras. When I came to New York in 1993, 92, I attended a class in Henry George School of Social Science, and I never realized how much economic plays a role into keeping people in health. So for the very first time I heard about the discussion and the cause and root of poverty, I connect with my professor of tropical medicine, that in the last class he said, remember doctors, there is no tropical diseases. What they are is economic diseases. I never understood what he meant, but it was retained in my brain. And when I was sitting in the Henry George School, I realized, and I have that aha moment. And I said, oh my God, that is true. What people need to keep in health is have enough to eat, have a very good condition, simple condition that fulfill the basic and fundamental needs. And that was my connection. Since then, I have been trying to promote and to contribute in the sense to understand that this is the key, how we can share the earth.
Thank you,
I want
Keisha.
to agree, just to say a little word, in my hope is being completed now because in Latin America it's happening. At this moment, if you haven't heard about Andrés Manuel López Obrador, the president of Mexico, without his knowing, he is applying Henry George with the change that he is applying. So I want to let you know that so you can search and build in your own expectation and hope. what is required for me is a little will, political will, and this man has that is being an example for Latin America, even though he has a lot of opposition right now.
Is his entire economic program Georgist, or is it just some things he's doing that's Georgist?
Wow. At this moment, he controls the inflation. The peso, the Mexican money has dropped, falling, is almost contained compared to the dollar. And beside that, the changes he's promoting is to manage the energy, and that is how saving Mexico at this moment, because he retrieved back from past government that they have privatized and sell the petroleum. He recuperates Pemex for the Mexican, and they call a new nationalization. He said, no, I pay for this, but it's for the Mexican, and those changes are going in that direction.
Real quick, how long has he been in power, and did he start implementing these things right away?
Oh, he has been empowered. This is the 6th year.
When did
He's
he-
in the fourth year,
All right, thank you.
2018. And he's gonna finish next year.
It's a big world, and I'm going to know everything about it before I'm
Please.
done. Thank you. Wendell, unmute yourself, and let's welcome Wendell Fitzgerald.
I'm crystal clear that this is going to happen. Now, whether it happens this lifetime or some other, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And part of it is kind of mystical understanding of how the world works. One of the things that happened recently was that this guy named David Lorimer, who wrote this book about King Charles, the radical prince. This guy Lorimer apparently knows Prince Charles personally, and apparently every time that on occasion when Charles goes to Scotland, where Lorimer is originally from, they will meet each other in a pub and have a chat. There's so many synchronicities around all of this. This whole roundtable is an absolute synchronicity in my life. This was at the end of the Jubilee year for me, and I started in 72, and I had no idea it was going to take 50 years to get to the Jubilee and say, wow, this is, there are things happening here. So one of the things I think that will happen, and is happening, is that I have encountered a couple of young people whose lives are dead. They're completely not ever going to happen for most young people, even if they're educated. I live in a town where there's the Southern Oregon University. I don't think any of that, I haven't had a chat with very many of them, but the ones I've encountered is, wow, you mean there is an answer to this mess that we're in? Yes. Now, they haven't, they have to knock on the door and have further conversations, but there was an excitement in the voices that I'd never heard from anybody.
Fantastic.
And the old folks who talk to me, and I lay out what might be necessary. Well, what do we do? And well, there really isn't anything. It's not an old paradigm economic or a political movement. You have to first understand what we're talking about, and then you can influence your community. Anyway, so I'm clear. This is all going to happen. Now, how it's going to happen, I thought, well, all we had to do was talk about it back in 1974 or 5 when I took the course finally. That was the naivete of a young person who was looking for something important to do in one's life. So here we are. We have not failed. We are moving ahead. So,
Amen.
Wonderful. Diane, can you hear me? And if you unmute, we're happy to hear from you.
Okay, all right, thank you. This is very interesting. So just a few things. One is I'm from Philadelphia. I think my son lives near where Henry George was born. So anyway, some of you might have seen the series, maybe it was on Netflix or on The Crown. But like now they have a thing, I don't know whether it's either on Netflix or Hulu. It's like King Charles in his own words, and he's telling different stories of his life. So anyway, there's a story in both of them, which you may know, that when he was 19 years old, he was anointed to be the King of Wales. And all these people from Wales came out in the street to protest. They were all protesting against him. So he wanted to go out and talk to them. And his handlers were like trying to pull him away. No, don't do that. Don't do this. And no, I want to talk to them. So he went out in the street and he talked to them and he found out what he wanted. And he taught himself the language. He was the first monarch in like hundreds and hundreds or more that who like learned the language. And he spoke to them in Welsh during his coronation or his, whatever you call it, when
Not an
you're
easy language to learn.
Wow.
right. So, I mean, I think his true self is really, he has, you know, his true self, and he did all these like adventurous things that he took on, these physical challenges to himself. So he has it in his character. I'm flying a helicopter. He went to, I don't know, maybe Australia or someplace where they had like the, you know, sort of like wilderness kind of challenges that, you know, he was very willing to face challenges. And also he went to like, he was forced to go to this terrible military school, and then he was like prevented from marrying the love of his life. And, you know, so he had to deal with all these tensions, which Harry is not dealing with. So just some thoughts. And also on Monday at our New View group, we did like a visualization about this. So I didn't tell you this, but I saw like him inviting you to Buckingham Palace or him hugging you. And another thing that I threw out, that I had a vision of Bobby Kennedy having a dialogue with him. And, you know, I think now we have like Bobby Kennedy tweeted about Ellen Brown's financial thing. And maybe we could put together a little financial, like a little policy group. So we already have a link connection from Ellen to Bobby. And I imagine Bobby could ask to have a dialogue or to interview or something with him. So that's all. What do you think?
We have to put them, you know, in the active mode. I think, you know, connecting people, connect everybody to this information we can.
I mean, you know, the person that's working closely, Meryl, is working closely with Bobby Kennedy.
Right.
Diane, you already know her, so we do have.
And I also know Celia Farber, who was close with him, and she
Right.
is in his book and
Right.
everything.
We also have the Fitzgerald connection too.
That's true.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Fitzgerald's right through here.
Mhm.
So I often make the point about the Jubilee, which has been mentioned already. Well, Wendell mentioned it. Jubilee justice is really a perennial wisdom teaching. In harmonic societies based on love and caring, the money system is used simply to facilitate the wealth exchange. That's all. It's not usury. It's not profiteering through the money system. And then the other aspect of Jubilee is the land, the fair share rights to the land and resources, and the acknowledgement of that these are gifts of whatever creative force created the world. So we find this back thousands of years. This is also in the letter. She mentioned Ellen Brown. Now, Ellen Brown is known for her Public Banking Institute, and that's a pretty nice movement that's moving along too. A couple of years ago, Ellen and I did a webinar on the Jubilee Justice Economics of Peace, where we wove together the land problem and the money problem. And sometimes people see the land problem, they don't see the money, and vice versa. Well, that is the two main focus points that we're going to be continually addressing. And I think that's going to where the eureka is going to come, that the land and the money problem are seen as connected and what to do about them. It's out of the box of right and left. It's the core. Once you start wanting to have a world that works for everybody, is looking at the land and the money. So, yeah. So I think we had who, Bruce? Ruth is going to be next.
Well, I wanted to tell Diane, much of what you said is particularly the visualization exercise you mentioned reminds me, one of the reasons I adore Elizabeth Gould is we have a Zoom every single week planning the next roundtable. So for the last year and a half, Chris and Liz, we brainstorm about these roundtables, and Liz often teaches and reminds the point you made with your visualization story, which is my conclusion, we are creative beings to the very core and fiber. So what we think about, what we talk about, what we language, what we picture, we are in the process of feeding and creating. And those who want to tyrannize over us, fire hose their portrait of reality, of scarcity and things to scare us. It's time well spent to visualize exactly what we want. King Charles hugging Alanna, hugging Liz. It may not literally happen, but it's certainly transforming reality at that deep mystical level, which is part and parcel of what Paul and Liz teach in their books, The Valediction. It's a two-part effort. Yes, indeed, Ruth. And then there's a couple of comments in the chat. Hello again.
Hi. First of all, I'm a big believer in visualization, and I must say that when you bring in the heart and the emotion and actually feel the connection of the heart in the hug, and that this is actually an energetic reality, it will happen. It will happen. But what I wanted to say is that there's this incredible confluence of a move by the powers that are trying to manipulate everything to take away money and to take away land from almost everybody, but what they call the stakeholders, with, you know, central bank digital currency and the 15-minute cities. And this, I feel like this confluence it's terrifying to me. And I feel like there's been ways that people have been manipulated and funneled into this place where I think that they are going to all of a sudden be ready to wake up when they realize that they're going to be enslaved. I do.
We're already enslaved.
That may
No
be,
kidding.
but this is another level of enslavement. This is really, they're slamming the door shut.
Can you repeat what you said about the 15-minute cities?
Yeah, yes, that they are wanting to develop 15-minute cities that are defined by the 5G, and you will only be able, your car is going to be taken away, but it's
That's
the way
bullshit.
of
Sorry.
controlling
I
people.
want,
What?
and I want to, and Miriam, I want to stir you to one resource in order to contain this from being a giant rabbit hole we all tumble down together, if I may, and then returning it to you, Ruth. But Miriam, I highly recommend someone I follow on Facebook who encourages people learn about her, who really addresses that 15-minute thing, because that's your particular interest there, Miriam. Her name is Julianne, double-N-E at the end, Julianne Romanello. I highly recommend people follow her. You don't have to agree with all she posts, but it's pure, very factual, very intelligent analysis of the kind of scary things Ruth was just talking about, Miriam. You'll be very happy if you check out Julianne Romanello on Facebook. Ruth, do you have concluding
Well,
thoughts
all I want to
point?
say is that in terms of what is being held by the George's thought, I feel like there is a timing here that is almost perfection. That, you know, that this is coming in to this squeeze that is happening in terms of thought and freedom and creativity. It's the whole world they're trying to lock down. And I feel like maybe there's something about interfacing with the knowledge of this and understanding what you're bringing forward as an answer, another answer, I think might be relevant.
I want to quickly say something to address what you just said, Ruth. I think that what we really have to realize is when George Orwell wrote 1984, he actually wrote the future. There were people who took 1984 and implemented it. Well, if we don't want to live in this negative world, we've got to write the positive world we want, not the negative world we don't want. And that's why we have to move away from all the problems, which you have to understand. In order to create solutions, you do need to understand what the problems are, but that's not what you write about. What you write about are the solutions.
I know.
That's what we're trying to do.
I know. I feel like there is this way of understanding how to interface with what's going on, because we talked about the fact that it's hard to get this information sometimes to have the impact that it deserves. And I feel like understanding what's going on right now may be a way of creating that impact.
Yeah. I agree.
And I see Diane Perlman.
I'm thinking, I always sort of look at what are the barriers to what we want to do. So there, like right now, and we talked about this, King Charles is sort of considered by a lot, a lot of our friends as like evil and part of the the part of the problem and the dark forces. So it occurred to me, so are you familiar with James Roguski? He's doing all the work on the World Health Organization, trying to take over sovereignty of all the countries and the pandemic treaty. So anyway, I know him. I mean, I've called him on the phone in the very beginning. He puts out his phone number. So he might think that. So anyway, I thought I could call him and put in a good word for Charles, for him to have a positive visualization of King Charles. And everyone listens to him. He's been on Del Bigtree. He's been on he's been on everything. And he's like, I'm very grateful to him. He's like the one person in the world who's like saving us from digging up all the, schemes of the World Health Organization. So anyway, maybe I'll call him and, ask him to like hold a vision of King Charles's true self, and maybe also understanding like if and how he got co-opted, or what's really going on about him with all those.
What's his last name again, Diane?
Roguski. If you look
R-O.
Guski. If you look on his
Yeah, I'm on his.
Substack.
Yeah, Roguski. That was on behalf of someone in the chat, Liz.
I know we're coming close to the end, and I want to make one quick request. We are having another event next Wednesday at the same time, because we want to pick up the energy field that we're now going through the shift. Okay, the interregnum will be over, the coronation will happen. The reason we're taking this seriously is because they take it seriously. Okay, I think I want to make that point. They're working with these mystical powers. We've got to get in there and begin to influence how they're using mystical powers that we all, just like the land issue, we all have to be involved consciously in the use of these powers to help neutralize the misuse that these powers have been for these people who have controlled it for so long. So that is my request, that everyone put your thinking caps on, think about where you can get this out. We are going to be creating the letter without King Charles involved. So you'll have a choice whether you want to use the King Charles idea or whether you want to just go with the straight letter. But this is building to the world peace proposal, which is a proposal that really will become a reality once we actually get these ideas beginning, once we can really see the beginning of the economy of peace being formed.
Chris, can I save you for last, Chris, for the
Sure.
last closing thoughts? All right. Wendell, I can give you about 20 seconds before I've got to survey our other panelists for closing thoughts. Thank you.
In terms of visualizations, it's really clear that the powers that be are done and they know it. Simple visualization, they wouldn't be pulling this crap off that we're seeing. This is desperation, number one. There was a number two, but I can't remember what it is. So
Come back next week. Tell us.
no, the next week is that the other visualization is that the beef with the Fitzgeralds will be completely acknowledged and resolved. Thank you very much.
Fred
Oh.
Harrison.
See you next week.
What beef with the
Yeah, very quickly, if I may then. Wendell, you're wrong. The powers that be aren't done. You guys are about to possibly re-elect one of the leading land speculators in the world as president of the United States. And that's the kind of obstacle that you guys have to figure out how to overcome. I'll leave it at that.
Already done. Thank you.
All right. All right. And now I want to get final thoughts, probably in this order, starting maybe with Paul and then Alanna. I'll chirp in something, and then Chris Milligan. Paul Fitzgerald.
All right, it's a matter of timing. We're there. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's get it done. All right. Time has come. Liz.
Hey, I said my piece. I gave you my final word. Come
Thank
next
you.
week.
Alanna.
Hey, I just Gratitude. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining in this conversation today. And let's just keep our clear, high intention and purpose, and we'll just move ahead in a beautiful manner. I don't doubt it for a minute. So thank you, everybody.
And Alanna gave a great presentation, you can see on YouTube, on the deep and natural history of these ideas of, oh, the earth belongs to everyone. It's not a radical idea. That's what came forth naturally out of humans and in society. And then it was co-opted by sickos who were bullies and wanted all for themselves. And you can see that great teaching on YouTube at the channel Valediction Vision. Valediction Vision. The video is Roundtable 16, Sacred Rule Economics. It puts all this stuff about Henry George in the context of all of human history. You're gonna love it. As I love our host and my boss and the publisher of my book, Chris Milligan.
Oh, golly, Wally Doodle. Thank you so much. And, you know, I'm a strong believer in free will. And, you know, we all willingly joined this program and had this discussion, okay? And so, you know, Prince Charles is a person. He does have free will. And he's in quite a position. He could implement this right away or at least start. So, you know, again, somebody brought this up earlier, you know, a lot of people want to say, well, these people over there, they're just evil. They're just bad. And, you know, we're all people. Like Mr. Kennedy said, we all breathe the same air. Okay. We all, well, not all of us, but many of us have children, and we want to see those children survive, and their children and their children. So, you know, let's spend this week before, you know, our next one, and pray that Charles will use his free will in a positive, good way,
For the
and
people.
onwards to a better future for our children and all.
You're right.